Ryan's office revenge.
The best part about watching my supervisor panic wasn't the money, though. That $265,000 offer didn't hurt. It wasn't even seeing her scramble to explain to the board why 6 major clients walked out in 4 weeks. The best part was knowing she'd brought it all on herself when she hit that delete button in front of 31 people. My name is Caleb Morrison. I'm 53 years old, and 3 months ago I watched what I thought was my career get destroyed in about 30 seconds. Turns out it was actually the beginning of the most satisfying revenge story you'll ever hear. But let me back up, because this whole thing started way before Rachel Williams decided to torch my work in that conference room. And trust me, you need the whole story to understand just how perfectly everything fell apart for her. 18 months ago, I took a job at Apex Technology Solutions as Senior IT Infrastructure Consultant. Look, I've been working in technology for 27 years. Started as a mainframe operator right out of high school at a bank in Cleveland. Worked my way up through network administration, systems engineering, cybersecurity, the whole 9 yards. Survived Y2K when everyone thought the world would end. Made it through the dot-com crash when half my friends got laid off. Weathered 2008 when companies were cutting IT budgets left and right. So when I saw this consulting job posting, I figured it would be steady work. Help some manufacturing companies modernize their legacy systems, maybe share some hard-earned wisdom about keeping networks secure, clock out at reasonable hours for once. My wife Linda had just been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and the new insulin wasn't cheap. Our daughter Emma was a junior in college, and our son Matt was planning his wedding. I needed job security more than I needed excitement. What they didn't mention in the job interview was that Apex was bleeding clients faster than a server with a memory leak. The guy before me lasted exactly 8 months before walking out. No notice, no transition, no documentation, just gone. And my new supervisor, Rachel Williams, made it crystal clear from day one that she blamed technical people like me for the company's problems. Rachel had been running the consulting division for about 2 years when I arrived, long enough to become convinced that she'd figured out the perfect formula for efficient service delivery. She was one of those MBA types who thought IT was all about cloud migration and vendor management. You know the type. Never configured a router in her life, but could talk your ear off about digital transformation and operational efficiency. She had one of those corner offices with motivational posters about innovation and synergy. The idea that manufacturing clients might want to work with someone who actually understood their day-to-day technical challenges was completely foreign to her theoretical approach to everything. Here's the thing, though. When I started digging into our client files, I found exactly what I expected. Page after page of generic assessment reports that sounded like they'd been written by chatbots. No real understanding of how these companies actually operated their networks. No indication that anyone at Apex had ever looked at a production floor or talked to someone who kept machines running 16 hours a day. These weren't just any clients either. We're talking about Dennis Foster, who ran Foster Steel Manufacturing, a company that employed 180 people and had been in business for 25 years. Oliver Martinez's logistics operation, Martinez Freight Solutions, moved cargo for construction companies in 4 states. Simon Anderson ran Anderson Construction Group, building everything from warehouses to office complexes. These guys knew their businesses inside and out, and they could spot consultant nonsense from a mile away. So I started doing something that apparently was revolutionary at Apex. I began treating these clients like the experienced professionals they were. When Dennis mentioned during a routine quarterly check-in that network slowdowns were killing his production schedules, I didn't just log it as a ticket and move on to the next agenda item. I asked if I could come take a look. Rachel nearly choked on her coffee when I requested permission to visit a client site. We don't do field visits. That's inefficient use of billable hours. Handle it with a remote assessment. But I pushed back. Dennis has got $3 million worth of CNC equipment connected to a network that's probably older than some of our junior analysts. If we can solve his bottleneck problem, he'll probably extend his contract with us. 3 days later, I'm walking through Dennis's facility in steel-toed boots and a hard hat, talking to his IT manager, looking at network topology diagrams, actually understanding what was going wrong. Here's what I found. Their network infrastructure was completely backwards for the type of industrial environment they were running. These weren't office computers sending emails. Dennis's operation had CNC machines, inventory management systems, and quality control equipment, all trying to communicate through a network designed in 2015 for half the load they were running now. The real problem was their main switch was creating a bottleneck during shift changes, when multiple production lines tried to sync data simultaneously. Every morning at 7 a.m. and every evening at 3 p.m., the entire network would slow to a crawl while machines uploaded production reports and downloaded new job schedules. Picture this. You've got 12 CNC machines, each one trying to upload 200 megabytes of production data at exactly the same time, all going through a single 100 megabits per second connection. It's like trying to empty a swimming pool through a garden hose. I spent 2 weeks designing a segmented network architecture that separated production traffic from administrative traffic, installed managed switches with quality of service protocols to prioritize manufacturing data, set up redundant pathways so if one connection failed, production wouldn't stop, created dedicated VLANs for different types of equipment so CNC machines weren't competing with email servers for bandwidth. We upgraded $15,000 worth of network hardware and retrained their IT staff on the new configuration. I worked with Dennis's IT guy, a sharp young man named Kevin, to implement monitoring tools that would alert them before bottlenecks developed. Results were immediate. Network-related production delays dropped by 18%. That's real money. We're talking about $28,000 in avoided downtime costs per month. Dennis was running 3 shifts, and when one shift couldn't upload their data at the end of their cycle, it delayed the next shift getting their job assignments. Dennis was so impressed he signed a 2-year extension and referred 2 other manufacturing companies to us. He also started calling me directly when he had technical questions, bypassing the standard support ticket system entirely. When I presented the results to Rachel, you'd think she'd be celebrating. Instead, she pulled out her efficiency reports. Caleb, you spent 42 billable hours on this project. Standard protocol is 16 hours maximum for network assessments. Why did you spend nearly triple the allocated time? She didn't care about the $28,000 monthly savings. She didn't care about the 2-year contract extension. She didn't care about the 2 referrals. All she saw were efficiency metrics that didn't fit her spreadsheet formulas. Look, Rachel, I said, Dennis is paying us $185,000 a year now instead of $75,000. Seems like a pretty good return on investment for those extra 26 hours. That's not how we measure performance here, she replied, making a note in her tablet. Billable hour optimization is our primary success metric. We have standardized procedures for a reason. Right there. I should have known how this was going to end. Same thing happened with Oliver Martinez's freight operation. Guy called me up about 2 weeks after the Dennis success. Said he'd heard good things and wanted to talk about his logistics technology challenges. Oliver's problem was different, but just as real. His dispatch system kept crashing during peak hours. Drivers couldn't get route updates. Customer shipment tracking would go down right when clients needed information most. His IT costs were through the roof because he was constantly calling emergency support vendors to get systems back online. I'm spending $8,000 a month on emergency tech support, Oliver told me during our first phone call. My drivers are sitting in parking lots waiting for the system to come back up so they can get their next delivery address. My customers are calling every hour asking where their shipments are, and I can't tell them because my tracking system is down again. Standard Apex consulting response would have been to recommend some cloud-based logistics platform, charge him $40,000 for migration, and call it a day. That's exactly what Rachel suggested when I brought up Oliver's situation during our weekly team meeting. Martinez Freight is a straightforward cloud migration case, she announced, clicking through her PowerPoint slides. We have 3 approved vendors that provide logistics software as a service. Implementation time 3 weeks. Billable hours 20 maximum. But I'd already spent an hour on the phone with Oliver and I knew his problem wasn't something you could solve with generic cloud software. The guy had been running trucks for 15 years. He knew logistics. If a simple software swap could fix his problems, he would have done it already. So I asked if I could dig deeper. Caleb, Rachel said, we need to maintain consistent service delivery protocols. Client problems have standard solutions. That's how we scale efficiently. Here's the thing about working in IT for 27 years. You develop a nose for when something doesn't smell right. Oliver's system crashes weren't random. They happened at predictable times: Monday morning rush, Friday afternoon delivery confirmations, end-of-month billing cycles. That tells you it's not a software problem, it's a capacity problem. So I did what Rachel definitely didn't want me to do. I spent a week analyzing Oliver's actual system logs, mapping database performance during peak loads, understanding where the real bottlenecks were. I even rode along with one of his drivers on a Tuesday morning to see what happened when the system went down in the middle of a delivery route. What I found was fascinating. The problem wasn't the software at all. Oliver's dispatch system was fine. The problem was the database server was running on hardware from 2018 with memory configurations designed for half the data load they were currently processing. Here's what was happening. Oliver had grown his business by 60% over the past 3 years, but nobody had upgraded the underlying database infrastructure. During busy periods when 30 drivers were all trying to update delivery status simultaneously while customers checked tracking information online, the database would run out of available memory. The system would start swapping data to disk, which is about 100 times slower than keeping it in RAM. Everything would grind to a halt. It's like having a successful restaurant but never upgrading from your original 4-burner stove. Eventually, you're going to have customers waiting 2 hours for their food, no matter how good your recipes are. I designed a database optimization strategy that included memory upgrades and query optimization. Instead of replacing the entire system, we tuned what they already had. Upgraded the server to 64 gigabytes of RAM, optimized the database indexes, and implemented connection pooling to handle multiple simultaneous users more efficiently. Cost to implement about $18,000 in server upgrades and database configuration changes. I worked with Oliver's IT guy, a contractor named Pete, who knew the system inside and out, to implement the changes over a weekend. We also set up monitoring tools to track memory usage and query performance, so they could spot problems before customers noticed them. Results were immediate. System crashes dropped from 3 to 4 times per week to maybe once per month. Response times improved by 60%. Oliver's emergency support costs went from $8,000 per month to practically nothing. More importantly, his drivers weren't losing 2 to 3 hours per day waiting for systems to come back online. Oliver was so happy he gave me a case of craft beer from a local brewery and recommended us to 3 other logistics companies. More importantly, he doubled his contract with Apex from $90,000 annually to $180,000. When I presented these results to Rachel, I thought maybe she'd finally understand what I was trying to accomplish. Instead, she focused on the fact that I'd spent 38 billable hours on what she'd allocated 20 hours for. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Caleb, she said, pulling up her efficiency dashboard on her laptop. You're consistently overspending time on projects. Yes, the client is satisfied, but we're not optimizing our resource allocation. Rachel, we just turned a $90,000 client into a $180,000 client. That's a 100% revenue increase plus 3 referrals. Doesn't that matter? What matters is scalable processes, she replied. If every consultant spent 38 hours on every project, we'd never be profitable. We need consistent, efficient service delivery. That's when I realized Rachel and I were living in completely different worlds. She saw client work as an assembly line where you standardize everything and measure success by how quickly you can process requests. I saw it as problem solving where you figure out what's actually wrong and fix it properly, even if it takes longer than your spreadsheet says it should. The third major win came with Simon Anderson's construction operation. Simon had been an Apex client for 18 months, but he was getting frustrated with what he called consultant runaround. His project management systems were unreliable, causing scheduling conflicts and communication breakdowns between job sites. Previous Apex consultants had given Simon generic advice: better project management software, cloud-based collaboration tools, mobile apps for field reports. None of it addressed his real problem, which became obvious the minute I visited one of his construction sites. Simon's crews were skilled and experienced. His project managers knew construction inside and out, but they were using 3 different software systems that didn't talk to each other. Scheduling was done in Excel, purchase orders were tracked in QuickBooks, field reports were submitted through a mobile app that didn't integrate with anything else. When a project manager needed to know if materials had been delivered to a job site, they had to check 3 different systems and make phone calls to get a straight answer. When accounting needed to bill a client, they had to manually cross-reference purchase orders with field reports to figure out what work had been completed. I've got project managers spending 3 hours every morning just trying to figure out what happened yesterday, Simon told me during our first meeting. By the time they get caught up on paperwork, half the day is gone and crews are standing around waiting for instructions. I spent a week shadowing Simon's operation, talking to project managers, watching how information moved between office staff and field crews. The problem wasn't that they needed new software. The problem was that good information was trapped in separate systems that couldn't communicate with each other. I developed an integrated data solution that connected all of Simon's existing systems. Instead of replacing everything, we built interfaces that allowed information to flow between the different platforms automatically, used API connections where possible, and created custom data bridges where the software vendors hadn't built integration capabilities. The solution wasn't rocket science, just common sense applied to construction logistics. When materials got delivered, the delivery confirmation automatically updated both the project schedule in Excel and the billing system in QuickBooks. When field crews submitted progress reports through the mobile app, project managers could see real-time updates without making phone calls or checking 3 different systems. We also created a dashboard that gave Simon's office staff a single view of all active projects. Instead of toggling between Excel, QuickBooks, and the mobile app, they could see project status, material deliveries, crew locations, and billing progress all in one place. Implementation took about a month, working with Simon's office staff to map out their workflows and integrate the new data flows. I spent a lot of time with his office manager, a woman named Carol, who'd been managing construction paperwork for 20 years and knew exactly what information people needed and when they needed it. Results were dramatic. Project coordination time decreased by 25%. Billing accuracy improved significantly because there was no more manual cross-referencing between systems. Most importantly, Simon's project managers weren't spending half their day tracking down information that should have been available instantly. My guys can actually manage projects now instead of managing paperwork, Simon told me after the first month. Yesterday, one of my project managers had a concrete pour scheduled for 9 a.m., but the delivery truck broke down. Instead of making 6 phone calls to reschedule everything, he just updated the system once and everybody got notified automatically. The crew, the concrete company, the next job site that needed the crew in the afternoon. Saved us 4 hours of phone tag. Simon's annual contract went from $110,000 to $275,000. He referred 2 other construction companies to us, including one major commercial builder that was interested in the integrated approach we'd developed. But when I presented these results to Rachel, you can guess what happened. Caleb, you spent 54 billable hours on this project. Our systems integration protocol allocates 24 hours maximum. This is becoming a pattern of resource mismanagement. 54 hours to generate $165,000 in additional annual revenue plus 2 major referrals. In any sane business world, that's called success. But Rachel was living in efficiency metric land where hours mattered more than results. Look, I said, maybe we need to rethink how we measure success here. Our client retention rate is up 35% since I started taking this detailed approach. Revenue per client has increased by 85%. Customer satisfaction scores are the highest they've been in company history. What we need, Rachel replied, is consistent service delivery that can scale across our entire consulting team. Your methods are too time-intensive and too dependent on individual expertise. We need standardized solutions that any analyst can implement. That's when I realized this wasn't really about efficiency or scalability. This was about control. Rachel had built her management philosophy around the idea that technology problems had standard solutions that could be applied consistently by anyone with basic training. The notion that some problems required deep expertise, extensive analysis, and customized solutions threatened everything she believed about how consulting should work. Over the next several months, our fundamental disagreement kept escalating. Rachel would assign me projects with strict hour limitations. I'd exceed those limitations because the actual problems were more complex than her standard protocols assumed. She'd document my inefficiency. I'd deliver exceptional results that generated significant additional revenue. The tension was affecting our weekly team meetings, and I could feel other consultants watching our exchanges with uncomfortable silence. At home, Linda was dealing with her diabetes diagnosis, and the stress of managing her condition while worrying about insurance coverage was taking its toll on both of us. Emma was in her final year at Ohio State, and we were looking at another $15,000 in tuition for spring semester. Matt and his fiancée were trying to plan their wedding on a budget. but even a modest celebration was going to cost us $8,000 that we'd need to pull from our emergency savings. I needed this job to work out. At 53, with a specialized skill set, I couldn't afford to be unemployed for months while looking for another position. The technology consulting market was competitive, and most companies wanted younger, cheaper analysts who could work 60-hour weeks without complaining about work-life balance. The breaking point came during our annual strategic planning meeting in early November. Our CEO, Richard Peterson, was reviewing departmental performance. When he mentioned that client retention had reached an all-time high and revenue per client had increased 78% year over year. "Whatever we're doing in technical consulting, we need to expand it across other divisions," Richard announced. "Our hands-on approach to understanding client infrastructure is clearly resonating with manufacturing companies who are tired of generic consulting advice. Rachel, I want you to document these best practices so we can implement them company-wide." I watched Rachel's face during Richard's praise. You could see her internal struggle. The success metrics were undeniable, but they validated everything she'd been trying to stop me from doing. Richard was essentially asking her to scale an approach that she fundamentally disagreed with. After the meeting, she cornered me near the elevator. Her expression was different from our usual professional disagreements. "This looked personal. I want to see all your client documentation," she said. "Every analysis, every report, every hour you've spent on projects over the past 18 months. I'm conducting a comprehensive audit of our service delivery methods." It was clearly intended as punishment. Hundreds of hours of bureaucratic busy work that would pull me away from actual client work. The kind of assignment designed to make someone quit rather than deal with the hassle. But I approached the audit project the same way I approached everything else. Methodically and thoroughly. I spent 2 weeks compiling everything: network assessments, system optimization reports, implementation documentation, results analysis, client feedback, revenue impact studies. The finished audit was 67 pages of proof that detailed technical analysis was directly responsible for over $385,000 in additional annual revenue, and a client retention rate that had improved from 68% to 91%. Every hour I'd overspent on projects had generated measurable business value that our competitors couldn't replicate with their standardized approaches. Every inefficient site visit had resulted in solutions that fundamentally improved how our clients operated their businesses. I was actually proud of that audit. It represented 18 months of genuine problem solving that had transformed relationships with some of the most demanding industrial clients in our region, which made what happened next feel like a betrayal of everything I'd worked to accomplish. Rachel scheduled an all-hands department meeting for a Tuesday morning in early December. She announced that we needed to realign our service delivery protocols and that my audit would serve as a case study for discussion. I figured she was finally ready to acknowledge that detailed analysis was driving our improved performance. Maybe she'd even admit that Richard's directive to expand our approach company-wide made sense. Instead, she had me display my audit files on the main conference room screen while all 31 members of our department watched. Then she began systematically tearing apart every detailed analysis, every extended site visit, every customized solution as examples of resource misallocation and process inefficiency. "This is exactly what we need to eliminate," she declared, scrolling through months of careful documentation. "Excessive technical analysis creates unrealistic client expectations and unsustainable service delivery models." These files represent a fundamental misunderstanding of scalable consulting practices. I felt my face getting hot as my coworkers watched her turn my greatest professional accomplishments into a cautionary tale. She was presenting $385,000 in additional revenue and a 23-point improvement in client retention as evidence of what not to do. "Caleb's approach," she continued, using my first name in a way that felt deliberately diminishing, "represents old-school thinking that doesn't align with modern consulting efficiency. We can't afford to have analysts spending weeks on problems that have industry-standard solutions." But then she did something that crossed every line of professional decency. She opened my complete audit database. Every client analysis, every system assessment, every process improvement that proved detailed technical work was the foundation of our business success. Her cursor moved toward the delete option. "This entire methodology is outdated garbage," she announced to the room. "Starting today, we return to efficient, standardized consulting protocols that can be executed consistently across our entire team." And she clicked delete. I watched 18 months of work disappear from the screen, 67 pages of documented success gone in one vindictive click. The conference room was dead silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and someone's pen clicking nervously. You could feel the tension radiating off every person in that room. Even Rachel's biggest supporters looked uncomfortable with what they'd just witnessed. Rachel turned away from the screen with this satisfied smile, clearly expecting me to accept the humiliation and start rebuilding my work according to her efficient protocols. But she'd made one massive miscalculation. While she was destroying my documentation, she hadn't destroyed the actual relationships I'd built with our clients. Dennis still had his optimized network running. Oliver's database was still performing flawlessly. Simon's integrated systems were still saving him hours of coordination time every day. Those operational improvements existed in their facilities and their bottom lines, not in our computer files. My phone started buzzing in my pocket before Rachel finished explaining her new streamlined service protocols. The caller ID showed Crawford Tech Solutions, a consulting firm that 2 senior engineers had started after leaving IBM last year. I stepped out of the conference room to take the call, my hands still shaking from watching 18 months of work get erased in front of my colleagues. "Caleb," said the voice on the other end. "This is Jason Crawford. We've been tracking what's happening at Apex, and we think it's time we talked." The conversation that followed changed everything. Crawford Tech had been monitoring our client retention improvements for months. They knew exactly who was responsible for the technical solutions keeping major industrial accounts satisfied. They'd been planning to approach me, but watching Rachel destroy my audit files convinced them the timing was perfect. "We're prepared to offer you $265,000 annually to join our team," Jason said, "plus profit sharing and complete autonomy over technical consulting strategies. We believe detailed infrastructure analysis is the future of industrial IT consulting, and we want you to build that future with us. $265,000. Nearly 60% more than my current salary, working for people who valued exactly what Rachel considered wasteful inefficiency. We know you can't bring proprietary information from Apex," Jason continued, "but we also know that technical expertise comes from experience and problem-solving capability, not database files. If you join us and clients choose to work with someone who can actually solve their problems rather than someone who treats them like efficiency metrics, that's just market forces at work." I understood immediately. They weren't asking me to steal clients or violate any agreements. They were pointing out that if I left Apex and clients decided they preferred working with someone who understood their operations, that was their choice to make. When I walked back into the conference room, Rachel was still lecturing about standardized service delivery while my coworkers stared at their notebooks, clearly uncomfortable with what they had witnessed. She noticed my return and paused her presentation. "Do you have questions about our new protocols, Caleb?" I looked around the room at people I'd worked alongside for 18 months, then at the blank screen where my audit had been displayed before being destroyed, then back at Rachel's expectant expression. "Actually," I said, "I have an announcement to make. I'm resigning from Apex Technology Solutions effective immediately. I'll be joining Crawford Tech Solutions as Director of Technical Consulting." The room went dead silent. Rachel's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to confusion, then something that looked like panic. "You can't just quit in the middle of a department meeting," she stammered. "There are protocols, transition procedures, notice requirements." "Actually," I replied, pulling out my phone to show the contract offer, "my employment agreement allows immediate resignation in cases of hostile work environment. Having my work publicly destroyed while being humiliated in front of colleagues qualifies." Richard Peterson, who'd been quietly observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately before any hasty decisions." But I was done with private discussions. Rachel had chosen to humiliate me publicly so she could experience the consequences the same way. "There's nothing to discuss," I said, gathering my personal items from the conference table. "My decision is final." As I headed for the door, Rachel called after me, her voice higher than usual. "You're making a huge mistake, Caleb. Crawford Tech is a startup with no track record. You're throwing away job security for some fantasy about technical analysis." I paused and turned back. "We'll see which approach proves more valuable." Within 48 hours, I'd cleaned out my office and started at Crawford Tech Solutions. Their facility was smaller than Apex's, but filled with energy about building something innovative in industrial consulting. More importantly, I was finally working with people who understood that technical success came from solving real problems, not processing service requests efficiently. The validation of my decision came faster than I'd imagined. I didn't reach out to any Apex clients. I simply updated my professional profiles and continued being the same person who'd spent 18 months developing genuine solutions for manufacturing companies. The first call came Thursday morning. Dennis Foster called my new direct line wanting to congratulate me and discuss Crawford's technical capabilities. We talked for 2 hours about his operational needs and expansion plans. By conversation's end, he'd scheduled a meeting to discuss transitioning his account. The second call came Friday afternoon. Oliver Martinez wanted to explore working with someone who actually understood logistics technology instead of trying to sell cloud solutions that didn't fit his needs. By my first week's end at Crawford Tech, I'd received calls from 5 former Apex clients, not because I'd solicited them, but because they preferred working with someone who could solve their actual operational challenges. Meanwhile, Rachel was discovering what she'd actually deleted. Through professional network contacts, I heard about her growing panic as she tried maintaining relationships with clients who were no longer interested in efficient service that didn't address their real problems. 6 months later, Crawford Tech had grown 150% based largely on industrial clients who'd followed me from Apex. I was promoted to senior partner with equity participation. Apex Technology Solutions lost over 60% of their technical consulting revenue. They laid off half their staff and brought in a turnaround consultant to avoid bankruptcy. Rachel wasn't retained in the restructuring. Today, I'm running technical consulting for one of the region's fastest-growing IT firms. Every day, I solve real infrastructure problems for companies who appreciate working with someone who understands their challenges. Linda's new insulin is fully covered under my enhanced health plan. Emma graduated debt-free last spring and landed a great job in marketing. Matt had the wedding he and Sarah dreamed of, and they just bought their first house. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people experience the natural consequences of their own terrible decisions while you build something better elsewhere. You know what I tell younger engineers now? Your work speaks louder than any PowerPoint presentation ever will. When you solve real problems for real people, they remember. And when someone tries to erase that history, they're only erasing their own credibility. Sometimes standing up for what's right pays off in ways you never expected. In the end, I learned that respect isn't something you can demand or delete from a database. It's something you earn through consistent results that speak for themselves. After 27 years in this business, I've realized that experience and expertise will always find their way to where they're valued, no matter how many MBA theories try to standardize them away.